Hello everyone, welcome to UCL Creativity in Technology webinar series. My name is Noya. This is the note that if you have any question during the webinar, please leave it in Q&A box. We will select and discuss your questions later in this talk. Today we have Dr. Christine Charyton here giving us a talk. Dr. Charyton is a clinical psychologist specializing in the behavior interventions. Except for clinical aspect, she also contributes in research, including the synthesis and unification of interdisciplinary knowledge and the transdisciplinary science. She focuses on the integration of psychology and engineering with cognitive and learning interventions and has been actively working on the measurements and assessment of creative engineering design and cognitive risk tolerance. Today, Dr. Charyton will be talking about the art and the science of creativity. The first part of this webinar is Dr. Charyton's presentation. The second part is Q&A. This webinar will last for 40 minutes. Now, let's welcome Dr. Charyton.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Noah. I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to present at the University College London. And let's see, I am going to start screen sharing. And let's see. Okay. And I just wanted to let you know, again, the talk will be about the art and science of creativity. And for some time, I've been interested in these aspects. And I'm going to go through kind of a narrative as to how I got interested in this area and where the developments are. And just so you know, my affiliation, I'm no longer with Ohio State University, but I'm an entrepreneur. I have two of my own businesses. One is my psychology practice, and then the other is Veselka Farms, which I'm president of. And Veselka means rainbow in Ukrainian. And this is my address at my main office and my email if anybody needs to contact me. And later in the presentation, I'll also show you some websites I have, which have direct links if you don't remember the email. If you are interested in contacting me, you're more than welcome. So I will get started here. And basically, I was always interested in the art and science of ideas. In particularly, I was drawn to psychology because it is an art and a science, just like medicine. Really, I think of them as a science and an art more. But I'm talking about the artistic development of these ideas. And in Germany, Springer published my dissertation in which I looked at creativity from a general perspective, as well as domain-specific creativity. So I looked at, in science, at the application of science being engineering, and then in art being music. And I happen to also be a musician, so I was very interested in studying these areas and looking for commonalities and differences. So then that led to the development of creativity innovation among science and art, which is a discussion of the two cultures. I will talk about C.P. Snow as well, about his ideas about the two cultures. And this book is available in the United Kingdom, but also on Amazon and other areas. And I contributed 3 chapters myself, plus we also had interactive dialogue with discussion among all the people that contributed. And also I will talk about it more toward the end of other people that contributed, but for this talk, I'm primarily going to focus on my 3 chapters. So C.P. Snow discussed that he was a member of the two cultures, but they often didn't communicate with each other. And he was a scientist, background in physics and chemistry, and also was a writer. And in that way, I feel he's a polymath, that he was exceptional in more than one area. And he felt that these two cultures never really talked to each other and that they needed to communicate with each other. And that if they would realize they have more in common than they thought. So, and then I'm talking about myself and my interests. I was interested in the science and art of psychology. I happen to also paint, play music, compose poetry, but I'm more of a scientist at heart, and I felt that psychology was a great way to integrate my areas of expertise and interest. And also, I do believe there's a science and art to psychotherapy and medicine and other areas, and that contributes. again, musician, researcher, clinician, and I'm also an equestrian. I've been riding horses since I was 6 years old, and also have been playing piano since I was 6 years old. My first instrument is piano. I play organ as well. My second instrument was alto saxophone, and my third instrument is guitar. And I play the acoustic and electric, and I have my own acoustic and electric guitars as well. So in this talk, I'm talking about my objectives. First, I will discuss engineering creativity. What does it mean to be creative in engineering, and how do we define it? How do we measure it? How do we practice it? How do we gain these skills to be more creative in engineering? Then I will talk about the science of music with creativity and my interest in why look at music from a scientific perspective. Traditionally, most music research is all qualitative in nature. We were very empirical and interested in the quantitative aspects. And then last, I'll talk about polymaths and culture, specifically Ukraine as a case study with culture and polymaths. And I happen to be Ukrainian American. My dad was born in Ukraine and lived there till he was 5, and then moved to Germany, lived in Germany for 10 years, and then emigrated to the United States of America. And at the time when he emigrated, most people either went to Australia, Canada, or the United States. And my family came to the United States through my cousin, who happened to be a sister, a nun, and we were sponsored. So my areas of engineering creativity that I was interested in, my whole approach with the theory behind it, is that integrating engineering education, mechanical engineering, and then adding psychology to it. So, and then therefore, that's my background with engineering creativity. So to be creative in engineering, it requires originality and usefulness, which are also broad constructs that generally describe general creativity, but it's even more domain specific in engineering. So chapter 7 of the book is about engineering design, and I'm just going to kind of go through a narrative and tell you how we came up with these ideas with fellow researchers. So this is the book, Creativity, Engineering, Design Assessment, Background, Directions, Manual, Storing Guide, and Uses. Again, published with Springer in the United Kingdom. And this book has the actual CEDA tool in it, which I will get into in more detail, but it also is the directions and manual and scoring guide. So I felt to adequately distribute the tool to be used properly, there should be a book that everybody reads about it to know how to administer properly and also its proper uses. So, and it has been used even in the military from what I understand. So my colleagues, Dr. Lilly and Dr. Jagosinski, we came up with a way that we wanted to make this qualitative research more quantitative in nature. So initially, I'll abbreviate the directions, but we have the directions in detail. But basically, there are 2 objects in this design. They may use one or both. They may manipulate them in any way, but they may not duplicate them. So create a design that produces sound with these objects. And so therefore, there were 4 sketches, a description of what the design is, the materials that were used, the problems that they could also solve. So in other words, in addition to a design that produces sound, what other problems could this design solve? And then who were the users? So this is how we refined it. This was Dr. Jagosinski and Dr. Merrill and I in our work. And in the books, you'll see at the end has the peer-reviewed articles in there. So with these objects, these are the designs that somebody came up with. So you can see here that a microphone and a private speaker is the first design. And then the second design is the ball with the cylinder inside, which is the middle, the cylinder's in the middle of the ball, and it makes sounds when it's bounced. So it's a ball that bounces, has the cylinder in it, and it makes a sound. And then you go through the processes. So these are the materials. We analyze materials in this. This is all in the book. You can go to the book, Amazon, other places have the book, and Barnes & Noble. And then there are additional problems that are solved. So, you know, you can see here for professors, with that to decrease other surrounding sounds as an additional problem solve. The other one is it's a safety feature, and then the user. So you can see specifically children, young ages would enjoy the ball that bounces on the right, and then on the left, professors could use the microphone and speaker set for lectures and other ideas that are there. So the actual translations of the CEDA tool are in all these languages. I need to tell you that I specifically chose Ukrainian because I'm Ukrainian American. And in 1932 and 1933, there was the Great Famine known as the Holodomor. And Stalin and the Russians killed over 10 million Ukrainian people and starved them to death, even though Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe and was the breadbasket of the former Soviet Union. So, and also Ukrainian was forbidden by the Russian people because of communism, and the Ukrainian people preferred democracy. And they were not allowed to even use their own language during the Soviet occupation with the USSR. So I felt that I really wanted to be loyal to my roots and make sure that this tool was translated into Ukrainian. And by the way, the entire manual has been translated into Ukrainian, and it needed a physician and also an engineer to translate it because of the integration of the psychology terminology as well as the engineering terminology. You can see Spanish, French, Korean, Chinese. Chinese is accessible to Taiwan, also accessible to Hong Kong, and German also. Whoops, okay. So in chapter 8, I talk about the scientific side of music. And Dr. Jagosinski and I had conversations about this with our interest in nonlinear dynamics and fractal analysis. I had advanced training at the American Psychological Association. That was at UC in University of Cincinnati. And therefore, we used to have more complexity. There's more data, it's temporal data, meaning changes in time. And all of these changes in time are calculated with computers. So it's really amazing. If people understand dimensionality, there's no limit to dimensionality for how far you can analyze the data. But the idea that these nonlinear systems and fractal analysis were used to predict weather patterns, and with our sophisticated computer systems, we've gotten more and more accurate in predicting weather patterns. So to describe what we're looking for with the fractal analysis, we're analyzing the spectra of the slope. So basically the lines are plotted on an X and Y axis, and 1 over F spectra, or F to the -1, is known as the theory of aesthetic value. So I like using the dice and die description because that kind of shows how the complexity of the analysis is. So for pink noise, it's 20 dice with 6 sides. So you can see, if you're playing a game, if you've ever played board games, that's a lot of complexity, and 3 octaves from 100 hertz to 8,000 hertz. Instead, the descriptions of brown noise were considered to be boring, regular, and predictable. 1 to the F to the 2 power, or F to the -2 power, which would be 1 die with 3 sides. So with the theory of aesthetic value, it was described that the brown would be too boring and predictable, and people may not like it as much. Maybe more like, but to see even pop music maybe like that. But anyway, that was the description in previous research. And then of course, white noise is too random. That's your air cleaners or screens that drown out sound or help people sleep. So those are the way the data are analyzed in the spectral analysis. So we decided to pick John Coltrane. I ended up taking a graduate course with Dr. Weisberg at Temple University, where I have my PhD. And we had to select a case study that we thought would be appropriate, who would be the most creative person we could choose. So it gave me a lot of thought. It took me a long time to really think about who I would choose. So I chose John Coltrane because his music is very broad. His background, his dad was a preacher. His dad died early in his life, and he would practice and practice to bring his dad back to life. He missed his dad so much and loved his dad. And also his music, he played soprano sax, baritone sax, saxophone, and it's a true American music, specifically Black and African American music as well, but it contributes to the broad American music that we have today. And you can see in this piece, it's called Giant Steps. There is a meter, right? The time signature. There are notes that are in the time signature. There are measures. There are the 16th notes, 8th notes. There are half notes, etc. So this piece, we don't have time to play it, but you can go to YouTube and Google in YouTube, John Coltrane Giant Steps, and you can listen to the piece of music. So it's very beautiful, melodic, and the interesting thing is with our analysis, we ended up mathematically inputting every note. So each pitch, whether it's whichever octave it is, the duration of the pitch, and also the time signature, all of that was analyzed in a computer, and we had to translate it into a computer language and then analyze it in fractal analysis. So the bottom line that's interesting about this piece is that we thought it would be pink, but it was more brown as far as the spectra. And then this is his later work in 1967, Jupiter, and you can see there's no meter, there are no measures. It's very free form jazz. It was actually considered controversial at the time as avant-garde. And this was in 1967. You can think about all the civil rights activism, everything that was going on in society at that time, and it's very free form. And the interesting thing is when you listen to the music, you can look again, go to YouTube, Google Jupiter, John Coltrane Jupiter, and again, it's with the planets. He was very interested in science as well. And this was actually tended to be more pink, which is considered to be more aesthetically pleasing, but was still brown anyway. So then we have, where does brown come from? Well, it comes from Brownian motion from Robert Brown, an explorer that traveled many islands, a lot like Darwin did, only he was interested in botanicals. And the interesting thing that I want to point to is his discovery of the particle, which was from the planet itself. And this is his description of it. So that he said that these motions were as to satisfy me after frequently repeated. So he ended up aesthetically pleased by the science of the Brownian motion of the molecule under the microscope that he had from this plant from a specific island. So it was really an amazing discovery. And what we found is that John Coltrane's music tended to be more brown rather than pink. Remember that F to the -2 spectra versus F to the -1 spectra. And that this my colleagues and I, Dr. Jagosinski, Dr. Holden, and I, and Dr. Elliott, we ended up looking at it and saying that it was that the Brownian movement and Brownian power spectra is actually potentially more aesthetically pleasing than the pink. So then this led to other research where past research looked at Mozart, piano sonata in D major for 2 pianos, K448. And in K448, the whole idea of the music having a EEG impact in the frontal lobe was researched. in our study that we had done, and this is under review still, so it's not even published yet, but we decided to look at John Coltrane, My Favorite Things, and see how that compared to Mozart. And actually what we found is both musics were people with epilepsy had synchronization to the music in their temporal lobe when listening to the music, and the frontal lobe was not as much as a factor. So the interesting thing that I'm going to show you here is the green area is the temporal lobe. The red area is the auditory cortex, which is where sound is processed in the temporal lobe. And then the blue is the frontal lobe. So in the temporal lobe, when people have epilepsy, 80% of people with epilepsy have temporal lobe epilepsy. Here, wait a minute, let me do this. Okay, so 80% of the people have temporal lobe epilepsy. So, and that is also where music is processed. Therefore, it's a good idea that that the music could be used as a therapy to help prevent seizures from happening. So last, I'm going to talk about art, culture, and creativity, of how science intersects art. This is about Ukraine, and this is also about polymaths. So, and then I'm almost on my talk. I apologize if I'm a little short on time here, but just so you know, the Ukrainian flag, the blue represents the sky and the yellow represents the wheat. The trezub is the emblem on the flag, which literally translates to 3 teeth. And it was also 5000 BC, the Tripolians used this emblem now with symbolism. And then also Saint Volodymyr, people know him as Vladimir the Great, but he's really Volodymyr. He adopted Christianity in Ukraine, and the trezub became the emblem. So this is Ukraine. So you can see here on the east, right by Russia, Luhansk, Donetsk, those are all the areas where in 2014 and still ongoing, there's aggression and violence from the Russian government. And then on the left, you can see Lviv. My family is actually from around Lviv and Ternopil there. And the West traditionally was more related to Europe, and the East was more traditionally more related to Russia. However, it is one Ukraine now, and everybody is united. The Black Sea on the bottom is there. Kiev is the capital, which you can see the Dnipro River in the middle, which is a very historic river in Ukraine. And below the Black Sea is Turkey. So I was interested in polymaths and this case of East and West with Ukraine. So in this chapter, in chapter 9, I talk about Taras Shevchenko. Taras Shevchenko was born on March 9th in the 1800s, I believe. And he was a political activist, and he was also an artist and a poet. And he suffered tremendously. He was put in prison by the Russians, and the Russians tried to claim him as being Russian, but he's really Ukrainian. And he felt his faith in God actually helped him get out of this torture that he was receiving from the Russian people. And he died pretty young in the 40s, in his 40s. And then Ivan Franko, he is a philosopher and a poet, and he integrated philosophy into his poetry, which is very existential and beautiful. So you can kind of see the idea of taking these different disciplines and trying to integrate them and have a new idea. Alexander Archipenko is an engineer and an artist, more of a cubist surrealist. And his artwork even has 3-dimensional artwork where there's motion in the art. So in that way, if you talk about dimensionality, he's showing art with the 4th dimension being movement and time in his artwork, which is pretty amazing. And then we have Hanat Hadovich. He was a writer also. He was a bandura player and had music with bandura ensembles, made banduras. He also translated a lot of literature into Ukrainian for the Ukrainian people. And in that way, he's very much a polymath as well. And also, I must say that people in Ukraine, it's not uncommon for a physician to also dance or sing. It's part of the culture, so it's not, unusual. This is the bandura, which is the traditional folk instrument specific to Ukraine. And this is custom attire with the flowers in the hair and her custom wear. And I must say that even Russia was trying to outlaw the traditional Ukrainian clothing with communism and not allowing the Ukrainian people to celebrate their own history. It was that bad. And yet we're not allowed to speak the language. So my interest is the idea of creativity and innovation, interdisciplinary between different disciplines, transdisciplinary, in integrating these disciplines and collaborating with people from different fields. And I'd like to thank the University College London. This is Alexander Graham Bell. Not only did he help with the telephone and now our cell phones and all the technology, but also how to measure sound with the decibel. And I thank Noah. And these are my references right here. These are the books that you can look in. The peer-reviewed journal articles with the specific studies and numbers are in these articles, in the books, in the back in the references that you can look up. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My psychology practice website is ChristineCharytonPhD.com. Also, my phone number is very easy for my psychology practice. It's 614-60-RELAX. And so you can call me if you want as well. Veselka Farms, like I said, Veselka means rainbow in Ukrainian, and that's our horse farm, and there's a website there. And Sidpiece is our music. My husband and I collaborate, and that's our website as well. There are also links to emails from the website. And let's see, and I'll show you. This is my husband, and this is my horse, Yosef. Yosef helped me with my presentation. He's a great listener, and then we have Ranger and cats here that are therapy animals as well, therapy horse, therapy cat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charyton. Thank you very, very much. This talk is very interesting and inspiring, and the view is very broad. So I really like it. And we've received some questions. Can I ask?
Great.
Yeah. So basically there is an argument that, not argument, but people's traditional view is that arts embodies more creative aspects than engineering. So what do you think about this and why?
That's interesting. I think there is a pressure for artists to be creative that can stifle their creativity, because if you're a musician or you're an artist, you're constantly performing and constantly developing your technique and expanding. So there can be a lot of pressure to be original and creative. And I think that in the arts, usefulness is not as much as a requisite. It can be useful, but it doesn't necessarily have to be as useful in art. Whereas in engineering or science, there's the more need for that usefulness.
Yeah, I see. So for the arts, they have a pressure. So they can both be creative, but in arts, it's like intrinsically, there are more creative, the pressure to be creative, right?
Yes, I think there's more pressure to be creative. And I think that oftentimes in science and even engineering, it's not seen as being creative. So there's no pressure for it, but there really is a lot of creativity that's necessary.
I see. So also, and by the way, in the art and engineering, do you think the creativity in these two domains are different? So is creativity a domain-specific thing, even though they're overlap?
Exactly. Well, I think that there are aspects. There is that general that everybody is like, right, with all fields, and then there's also the domain-specific at the same time. So the novelty is consistent throughout all of them. But then the usefulness, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the science and the engineering definitely has to have more usefulness. And then the art doesn't necessarily have to be as useful. It can be more a statement, a political statement, an expression of opinion. So it really, depends on the person and how they express their creativity. But I think they're universal characteristics. I mean, I think that I mean, if you look at Albert Einstein, he was a household name because he was so creative as a scientist. And a lot of other scientists, maybe people don't know as much about because they didn't have a mass broad appeal. But in art, I mean, we can look at George O'Keeffe, Picasso. I think Alexander Archipenko, his work is amazing. I mean, just to be able to show movement in three-dimensional art, I mean, that really is totally amazing.
Yeah, I think I'm like highly agree with you. There is a like universal characteristics of creativity there, and from my perspective, is it might be the cognitive process, the thinking process for creativity for both engineering and arts may be the same, but the difference is maybe the measurement and assessment part. So we have different criteria for the creative performance in engineering and in arts, or say the psychology, science. So there are different criteria there, but maybe the thinking process they're highly overlapped.
Yes, and the thing is also, because I remember in our conversations before this talk, we talked about how do people become more creative. In all fields is practice, whether it's you're a musician or an artist. Even with the CEDA tool, it can be used as a tool for educational purposes to assess the creativity at different stages for the learning. So it can be used as an exercise to help stimulate creativity.
And also, so basically, this webinar series is focused on the creativity in technology. So it's more engineering orientated. So I would like ask, what can engineering students or engineering educators learn from arts? So from their perspective, what could they do, and how can they like inspire from arts aspect? Is there any?
That's a great question. What I like to say is that I think music is also is important for engineering, because in studies that we've done and asked for other interests, I think it was like over 50% of engineers are musicians themselves. And then art also is common, art in physics or art in engineering. I know a lot of engineering faculty that their daughters are artists, and it's very visual and spatial, and it's just expressed in different ways. So I think if somebody is an engineer, I would encourage them, even if they don't play an instrument, to sing, to try drawing or painting, to stimulate even that engineering creativity, because especially with the spatial skills, drawing is important for engineering. So even practicing drawing can be helpful.
I agree with you. Thank you very much. So I would definitely recommend this with to my engineering friends, for my friends who are doing engineering studies, for those PhD students. I think it's a very good suggestion to encourage them to do more like painting, like you said, like spatial skills and music things. Also, mm-hmm. Divergent thinking, actually. Divergently. Yeah. So, and also I personally have a question, because I am a psychologist. I'm doing research on psychology and creativity. And I'm wondering, how much do you think the academic psychology researchers can contribute to the creativity in industry? So how can we?
I think there's a lot. There's a division of the American Psychological Association called the Society for or actually the Society for the Psychology of Creativity and Aesthetics in the Arts. So even though the title is arts and they didn't put science in there, there's still a need for science. And a lot of this work I presented with the American Psychological Association. So I think that's a group that you might want to look into, because then you can be involved with the psychology of creativity and be abreast of the research going on in the field.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think this is also a pathway to the you're talking about it from interdisciplinary research perspective, right? It's because you have expertise on that, so it's very practical, this suggestion, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And another one is, do you think we have enough collaborations between academia and industry in the field of creativity generally, or in specific domains? Do you think we have enough collaboration?
Well, I think, of course, more work is always needed, more research is always needed, and that's a great way to expand and broaden the research and make it more like that usefulness component, because industry is very useful, especially with technology. Your viewers are also interested in technology. That can be an aspect of incorporating, looking into the creativity and innovation in technology as well. So maybe it sounds like Facebook has a lot of data probably.
Yes, yes, actually, yes. I think I highly agree with that, like the data. Yeah. Okay. So I think this is almost the end. I think we're very on time for this one. Thank you very much, Dr. Charyton.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you very much. And actually, this is the last talk of this webinar series. As the event organizer, I would like to show my greatest appreciation to our speakers, Dr. Charyton, and Dr. One Murphy, Dr. Fenglei Zhou, Dr. David Cropley, Dr. Preeti Parikh, and Dr. Yuri Belsky. And also, we have had speakers, UCL PhD students, Tiggy and Tao. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contribution to this webinar series. Also, I would like to thank my project collaborator, Mingjie Yi, for his support and assistance. Especially thanks UCL Grant Challenges of Transformative Technology for your sponsorship and your trust. Finally, thank you, our event participants, for your constant interest in our talks. We will keep conducting creativity-related events. Looking forward to seeing you in the near future. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.